Hello, I'm here today thanks to Dorks Music, and I've got the next in our series of saxophone playing tips. And today I'm going to be talking about how to get the most out of your reeds. I'm not, however, going to be talking about using any sorts of tools. You don't need any knives, you don't need a reed geek, you don't need reed rush, any of that stuff. Personally, I'm not really into kind of filing my reeds and doing anything like that. I find takes a long time, and I find it actually often shortens the life of the reed. Once you've worked on it, they don't tend to last as long. But there are a few very simple things you can do to make the most out of your reeds. I have to say I'm very lucky in that I'm a Van Doren artist, so Van Doren keep me supplied with reeds, but I hate wasting reeds, so I do tend to use every single reed in a box. I know some people will discard some of them, but hopefully with these tips and tricks it will help you be able to use every reed in the box and get the most out of them. So I've just put on a brand new reed out of the box, and the first thing I always do when I put on a new reed is I'll try blowing down each side of the reed separately to see how well balanced the reed is. So sometimes reeds are slightly thicker on one side than on the other side. That's all to do with the fact that the reed, the cane they're cut from, is a natural material and has natural variations, so some bit of it might be slightly thicker than others. You tend to notice the variation more on the bigger instruments, so tenor, baritone, you tend to notice it more than say on soprano. But I'm just going to blow down each side and see how well this one's balanced. I don't know if you can hear that variation, but for me, when I blow down the right hand side, it feels slightly less resistant, the sound's a little bit brighter. When I blow down the left hand side, it's slightly darker, slightly more resistant. And that says to me that the left hand side of the reed is probably slightly thicker than the right hand side. So what I can do when that happens, I can nudge my reed slightly across to the right, which was the thinner side. And what that's going to do, by moving the reed, it means I'm going to get a slightly thicker bit of reed that's making contact on the right hand side, and it's going to make sure I'm right on the edge on the left hand side, so it's the thinnest bit making contact there. So now I've moved that across, I'll have another blow. So to me, that sounds much more balanced now and it feels much more even to play. I've gone a tiny bit too far, so I'm going to nudge it back the minutest bit, and here we should be pretty much perfect. So now they're sounding pretty similar to me, so it should play nice and evenly. And that's nice and three blowing now, it feels really even. So that's a quick way to kind of get your reed, getting the most out of your reeds straight away. Now the other common problems you get with reeds are sometimes in a box you might have some reeds that are slightly harder than others and some reeds that are slightly softer. If they're slightly too soft for you, the easiest thing to do is just push the reed a tiny bit higher than you usually would. And the thickness of the reed that matters is the point where the reed is connecting with the tip of the mouthpiece. And the reed gets thicker as it goes down. So if we push the reed higher, what we're doing is we're making it so that a thicker bit of the reed is connecting with the mouthpiece. So it simulates having a harder reed on. So if you ever get a reed that's too soft, just nudge it up slightly, and that'll make it feel harder, give you a bit more resistance. If it's too hard, however, if you push the reed down, it will work to a certain extent, but there'll come a point where you've gone too far and the air is leaking over the reed and it's not working. But there are a few other ways we've got to make a reed feel a bit softer. Now, what I tend to do if the reed is too hard is I'll take the reed off and I'll bend the reed slightly or flick the reed slightly. And what happens is when a reed is brand new, it's perfectly flat, it's completely flat. But over time, it bends slightly to match the curve on a mouthpiece. And obviously, if we bend the reed, so it's matching the mouthpiece more closely, the tip of the reed, the starting point for it is closer to the mouthpiece. So when we blow, it's not having to travel as far, which makes it feel softer. And the way we can achieve that, if you take any kind of hard object, just so happens I've got a metronome tuner sitting on the stand in front of me, so I'm going to grab this and I'm going to put my reed flat on this with the kind of the text side up. Then if I put my thumb over the end, I can gently bend it up and even flick it like that. I know this looks crazy, but give it a try, I promise it works. And what that does, when you put it back on, it will have bent the reed ever so slightly to the shape of the mouthpiece, so it'll feel less resistant. Now you can, if you found earlier that one side was harder than the other, you can deliberately bend a little bit more on one side than the other. And again, that can help get it really even. I should say be slightly careful as you do this, because if you do it too hard, you will break the reed. So just be a little bit careful as you're doing that. So I'm going to pop this back on the mouthpiece now, and it should feel a little bit less resistant because we've bent that into shape. So let's have a listen. Yeah, so that feels a tiny bit softer than it did before, nice and free blowing. There is another way you can get that same effect, which is by taking the mouthpiece off, and if you put it on your hand, so it's sealed at the bottom, you can suck all of the air out, and that'll pull the reed onto the mouthpiece, kind of pulling it into that shape. And then you hear that quite satisfying ping when it releases. And that kind of really bends the reed and then lets it ping back, and that will soften it. This is also great if you've ever got a reed that's warped. So warping is when the end of the reed has gone slightly even. Sometimes you look at the end of the reed and it looks like a slightly wavy line. And if you do that, it will just pull the reed back into shape. Warping most commonly happens in the winter. If you've been somewhere when the sax is cold, then you bring it inside, then the heating, the humidity and the temperature can make reeds warp, and that's a great trick to fix that. You will find not all mouthpieces will do that. Some of them you can't get complete suction on, and some of them will get really good suction. It will take ages for them to ping back. That's actually an indicator of how well matched your reed is to your mouthpiece. So if the reed is a perfect kind of match and shape and design to the mouthpiece, it should stay close for a long time. If it's not quite on, or if there are any kind of imperfections on the mouthpiece, it might not do that for so long. But that's a great way of, again, softening up the reed slightly, making sure it's in perfect shape. So hopefully those are a few tips and tricks that you can try out on your reeds to help you get the most out of your reeds without having to invest in any tools or learn any complex scraping techniques. So have a go at those and let us know how you get on.